Good evening, Mr. Mossop.
Good evening, Chief Justice. How are you
Did
doing?
I pronounce your surname correctly?
You did.
Thank you very much. How are you this evening?
Chief Justice, I'm fine. I hope you are well as well.
Yeah, we are fine, thank you. We apologize that we have had to wait for quite some time. But you are here now. You will get a chance to impress the commissioners.
Thank you very much.
I'm going to start off by thanking you for making yourself available for consideration for appointment as a judge of the KZN division of the High Court. And I'm going to ask you questions up to a certain point, whereafter I will then hand over to, or rather allow the AJP to ask you questions. After that, I will ask the MEC, who is representing the Premier, to ask you questions, and after that, I will allow commissioners, those commissioners who may have questions for you, to ask you questions.
Understood.
I see that you hold the degrees of BA and LLB, which you obtained from the University of Natal. Is that correct?
That is correct.
And you obtained your BA in 1981.
That is correct.
And your LLB in 1984.
Correct.
So it looks like I came to the University of Natal just 1 year after you had completed your LLB.
I'm sorry we missed each other.
But I think when you were doing your last year LLB, the acting judge president of the KZN division was doing his first year in LLB, postgraduate LLB, as well as the former Chief Justice.
Yes, they were together.
So you may have seen them then. I see that you served articles from 1987 to 1988, and you worked as a professional assistant in 1989 in a law firm called Thorpe & Hens, and that's where you had done your articles too. And then in 1989 to 1990, during that time, you were a legal advisor. You were a legal advisor at Altron Corporation. You became a prosecutor in the district court in 1990, regional court prosecutor in 1990 to 1991. You became a magistrate, district criminal court magistrate from August 1991 to December 1995. And then in 96, you started your pupillage in January, and you started your practice as an advocate on 1 July 1996.
That is all correct.
And you went on, and then in December 2015, you obtained, you got silk, and you have continued to practice as an advocate throughout up to date.
That is so.
So that means you have been practicing as an advocate for how long?
I'm in my 26th year.
About 26 years.
That is so.
Yes. And about 7 of those years as silk.
That is so.
Yes. Tell us about your practice over the years. What kind of branches of law, do the cases that you do in your practice relate to?
So, Chief Justice, you will have seen that I've had experience in most sectors of the law, but probably for the last 15 to 20 years, my practice has been largely a commercial practice. And that flows from my employment, I guess, as a legal advisor in Johannesburg for the Altron Corporation. It was, excuse me, it was one of the biggest groups of companies in the country at that stage. There were over 100 companies in the group, and there were only 2 legal advisors. So we did basically everything that you could think of when it came to commercial law. Advising on law, drawing agreements, and being involved in corporate mergers and corporate takeovers. So that stood me in good stead for when I eventually went to the bar. And I initially had a practice that reflected my immediate origins, which was in the criminal courts in Durban. So I did criminal work for 3 or 4, maybe 5 years, and then I kicked into a commercial practice, which I've maintained ever since. So I do all sorts of corporate commercial matters, company disputes, shareholders disputes, Anton Pillow orders, interdicts, restraints of trade. I appear in commercial arbitrations where the numbers that are involved are mind-boggling, and I've sat as arbitrator in commercial disputes, and the last one involved the Petroleum Products Act. So I've had basically a very strong commercial and corporate background to date.
And have you got administrative law cases that you do in your practice?
I do. I often litigate against the Department of Trade and Industry in Pretoria over incentive programs that they run for industries that are encouraged to set up their businesses in less populated areas as a method of securing employment in the area. So I often act for those companies where they indicate that they've been badly treated by the DTI.
And constitutional law?
I've never appeared in the Constitutional Court, but Chief Justice, to be honest, isn't every single case that we deal with a constitutional case? The Constitution is everywhere, and it must be adhered to, and you must always have reference to it. You'll see that 2 of the judgments that are submitted in support of the nomination have references to the Constitution, which is everywhere. It's endemic.
Yes. And labor?
I've appeared in the Labour Court once or twice, but it's not a strong point of mine, Chief Justice, unlike you.
And competition law?
No, I've never appeared in the Competition Court.
Okay, all right. About how many cases in which you have appeared that have resulted in reported judgments, if any, if there are any?
No, there are, but I regret that, Chief Justice, I'm mostly on the losing side in those cases that find their way into the law reports. I think there are about 8 or 9, but I can't be certain.
About 89 or so?
Or 8 or 9.
8 or 9?
Yes.
Oh, okay, okay.
Yeah, I don't have a good record in the books.
Yeah. And how long have you acted? If you put your acting stints all together, how many months or weeks would that be?
42 weeks and 4 days.
And 4 days?
Yeah.
All in the KZN division?
Yes. Some in Durban, and then mostly in 2021 in Pietermaritzburg.
Yes. And are there any reported judgments that you have written during your acting stints that have ended up being reported?
Not in the SA law reports.
Yeah.
I mentioned in my application that a lot of my judgments have appeared in these daily news reports that come out, LexisNexis and Louis Law and that stuff. But nothing in the law reports. And I think, I'm not saying that any of my judgments are worthy of being in the law reports, but when you go to act, you aren't told how a law report gets your judgment. So I didn't know how to get anything onto SAFLI.
Yeah.
And eventually, towards the end of last year, it was revealed to me how it's done, but you don't get told these things, so
that
may explain it.
Now, During your acting stints, have you been involved in full bench appeals?
I have. I've sat in 3.
And have you conducted criminal trials and civil trials?
I have. In the last session, I did a criminal trial that lasted a month.
And you have done motion court opposed and unopposed?
Absolutely. It's the best part of being a judge, I think,
Yes.
is being in motion court.
Yes. What is your understanding of the rule of law?
Well, it's a political concept that everyone in a state, both citizens and institutions, are all subject to the same law. It has its origins, if I can remember correctly, in the 16th century Britain, and it was basically brought to light in a big way in the 17th century when it was used to combat the king's assertion that he had a divine right to rule. But from what I've read and understood about it, it may conceivably go back to the time of Aristotle, where he expressed certain views about laws ruling and not people. And it's intended to ensure that everyone suffers the same consequences under the same law.
And the doctrine of the separation of powers?
That is simply where the government of the state is divided into 3 separate arms. We know of them as the legislature, the executive, and the judiciary.
Please raise your voice.
I do apologize.
You do want the commissioners to hear what you have to say.
It's where the government of the state is divided into 3 arms: the legislative, the legislature, the judiciary, and the executive. And its purpose, from what I understand, is to ensure that there isn't a consolidation or a gathering of power in one place. And it's intended to devise measures to ensure that there isn't an abuse of power.
And the independence of the judiciary?
Well, that is vital. Judges hear cases based on the evidence that's brought to them, not on what someone tells them to do.
Thank you. Acting JP, I now give you an opportunity to put questions to the candidate.
Thank you, Chief Justice. Good afternoon, Mr. Mossop.
Good evening, AJP.
I have a few questions for you. I'll make a statement first and ask you whether you agree with the statement.
Yes.
The general thinking nowadays is that the white males are no longer required in the judiciary. However, in my view, the white males are required in the judiciary to address the question of diversity on the bench, provided they embrace the new constitutional dispensation and that they are committed and dedicated to protecting and promoting the constitutional values and human rights and to serving all South Africans. Am I correct?
I believe you are correct, AJP.
What is your view about diversity on the bench?
AJP, it is essential on at least 2 levels. Firstly, it's a constitutional imperative. It's in Section 174(2) of the Constitution that this committee must take regard of race and gender when appointing people who are applying, like me, for positions. We're a multicultural, multicolored society. Why should the bench not reflect that? So, on a constitutional level, it must occur. But I think that there is another reason why it must occur, and that is that there is evidence that multicultural groups that are called upon to make decisions make better decisions where there is a vast diversity of experiences and people. And where I picked that up is that there's a new book that has been published, I think, barely a week. It's called The Credentialed Court. It's written by an author called Benjamin Barton, who analyzed all the Supreme Court judges that were appointed to the Supreme Court in America. There have been 120 of them. And he found that in the last 20 to 30 years, notwithstanding the fact that people of various colors have been appointed as Supreme Court judges, there was a disturbing similarity, I use the word disturbing in quotation marks, a disturbing similarity in the people that were being appointed. They all had similar components in their lives. And the first one was that they were all gifted academics. They all did very, very well at university. They came from great academic backgrounds. They all graduated either cum laude, magna cum laude, etc., etc. The second thing is that when they finished at varsity, they all became clerks to then sitting Supreme Court justices. And the third thing that happened was that they all became judges, but not in the state. They became federal judges. The final thing that happened is that a great percentage of them actually became judges in the same court, and that was it's called the DC Circuit, which is the second most prestigious court in America because it has Congress and the Senate, etc., in its jurisdiction. And the author came to the conclusion that that was very dangerous because you got, in the end, what is called groupthink, where people with similar backgrounds and similar experiences start thinking the same way. And you don't need everyone thinking the same way. You need people to think divergently. And his conclusion in the book is that the greater the diversity, the better the decision that comes out of the decision-making body. And he then refined it down even more to the fact that small decision-making bodies who are called upon to answer multiple questions, such as a court, will benefit by having people of various backgrounds, and their decisions will thereafter improve and will be good. I have some skills. I make them available, and I hope that people might be able to learn from my skills, but I see it as a two-way street. I need to benefit from divergent views of colleagues on the bench, because I need to improve myself as a human being and hopefully as a judge if I'm so appointed. So I'm hugely in favor of it on those two levels.
So what skill do you bring with you to the bench?
I answered the Chief Justice that I can bring commercial skills. I have a lot of experience in that regard. But if you look at my career from beginning to end, I have a lot of experience in most areas of the law. I was a criminal magistrate for 5 years. I've been in industry. I've been an attorney. And when, if I recall correctly, when Justice Sutherland applied to be Deputy Judge President of Gauteng, he gave an answer that resonated with me. He said that if he could describe the perfect apprenticeship for a prospective judge, it would be that he has been involved in the law in different capacities, as an attorney, as a prosecutor, as an advocate, and he emphasized the notion of a generalist foundation to your legal knowledge, because he said basically that as a judge, you're going to get a bit of everything. You don't know when it's coming, but it will come. And so if you've got a general grounding in the law, that is a very big advantage. And I think he's correct. So those are the things that I can bring to the bench.
Yes. Do you embrace the new constitutional dispensation?
I do. I think my presence here is the first overt sign that I do that. I've had a very good career. I have a practice that sustains me well. I'm happy to give that up, though, to serve the greater legal community. Another thing that I am prepared to give up, and I'm not sure that everyone appreciates it, but while you are an advocate, there is great risk because you're working for your own account. If you don't work, you don't earn. There's no employee that will make sure that the till's ticking over while you're doing something else. But the corollary of that is that you have great freedom. If you don't want to go to work, you'd rather go and watch South Africa play Bangladesh in a cricket match, you can do it. If you want to go on holiday, you can do it. I'm happy to give up that freedom to serve. I have embraced the new South Africa, but I think it would also be correct for me to advise the committee that I've been embraced by the new South Africa. It's not just a question of me embracing it. It has embraced me. And I know that time is short and we're on overtime here, but I think I need just 5 minutes to tell a story which will tell you who I am and why I am the way I am. I have been at the bar for about less than 18 months, and I came back to Chambers one morning after being in court, and there was a message for me to contact a very senior silk at the bar. I hope I don't insult Advocate Boise Morani SC, but the person I was asked to go and see was probably the senior black silk at the bar, Advocate KK Mtiani SC. And when I got that message, I thought that I must have made a big mistake somewhere along the line. I must have done something really bad, because there was no reason for Mtiani SC to breathe the same oxygen as me. We were at different levels. He was at the top, and I was right at the very, very bottom. In the event, I went to see him. And he sat me down, and he offered me tea or coffee. I don't drink either. And there was a little lull in what was being said. And I said to him, Mtiani, you wanted to see me. And I wasn't being rude by saying Mtiani, because that's how you're taught to speak to people at the bar. I don't approve of it, but that is the way you're taught. It's an old English school system, and I don't like it. And clearly he didn't like it either, because he said to me, please don't call me Mtiani. It is such an impersonal way of speaking to people that you see every day. Please call me Ken. I learned that lesson immediately. And from that minute, that's a thing that I have adopted. I insist that people call me by my shortened first name, Rob. Everyone calls me that. My secretary, the secretary at the High Court who assists me, the usher in the court, the man who mans the boom gate at the High Court, they call me by my name. So that's the first thing that I learned from Ken. The second thing is that he said to me that he had noted me, he'd seen my progress, he'd received very good reports about me, and he had seen me in court, and he liked the way that I spoke to the bench and to my colleagues. At this stage, I began to think that maybe I hadn't done something bad. I thought maybe I'd done something good. And he then said to me, what do you think of these chambers? I knew those chambers. When I was an article clerk, I had briefed the previous occupant of those chambers, who was Vivian Niles Jr., SC, who became the first female judge in KwaZulu-Natal. So I was very familiar with them. They were big, they were square, they were on the 9th floor, and they looked out over the harbour. So I said, well, I told him that story. He said, just go to the window and look out the window and tell me what you think of the view. So I went to the window, I looked out, and it's a view to die for. You look across the Victoria embankment, through the palm trees, into the harbour. I said, it's beautiful. He said, do you like it? So I said, yes. He said, these chambers are yours. So I said, I beg your pardon? He said, these chambers are yours. So I said, are we going to be sharing? He said, no, these are all yours. I said, but where are you going to be? He said to me that he was going to be a judge. And in my naive way, I said, but the JSC hasn't sat yet. And then he said, sit down, and he looked at me, and people who know Ken, he had a really mischievous twinkle in his eye, and he just looked at me and he said, I am going to be a judge. And then I understood. He said, do you want these chambers? And I said, yes. I didn't know how much they were going to cost me, and I didn't know how I was going to pay for them. He said, right, done. And I walked out of there in a dwell. Not because I'd secured these magnificent surroundings, but because Ken, a black advocate at the top of the tree, had taken the time to become interested in me and to show attention to me and to consider me as one of his colleagues. And it was, for me, a profound moment in my legal career. I then said that I made an internal resolution that I would behave the same way that Ken had behaved towards me. And that's what I've tried to do for the last 20 years. I've tried to look after junior advocates as best I can. And I know I've been talking for quite a while, so I'll stop at that point, but there are other aspects that I can mention as to how I've embraced the new South Africa and the new dispensation.
Okay. Do you still want to say that, or you stop
Well,
there?
I can.
But keep it short.
AJP, what are you inviting him to talk on? Were you inviting him to continue?
So he says he has other things he has done in
No,
demonstrating
I
that.
I think he said in view of the time he can stop here. So,
Well, I can mention one thing, if I may, Chief Justice. It came about, I think, as a consequence of COVID. I had finished up an acting stint in Durban on the day that the hard lockdown was enforced, the 27th of March. And so I went home to the lockdown, and my wife is an attorney, and she and I sat at the dining room table every day of the hard lockdown at opposite ends with the printer in the middle. And we worked, and we generated fee notes for our respective practices. And I thought that was true of all advocates. But when I went back to chambers, when we got to level 4, I found that wasn't true, that the juniors in my chambers had suffered greatly. They hadn't had any work. And I saw that 2 months down the line, there was going to be a problem.
I'll allow only 1 minute now on that.
Okay, it was going to be a problem. So, so what I did was I put a plan in place where I sacrificed portions of my fees to bring juniors into matters, and that has continued since then to now.
Thank you. AJP, I would like
Yes.
to move on.
Just one question, last one.
Yes.
What is your work ethics?
DJP, I'm known at the bar as a hard worker. I go to work. I make sure that I'm in chambers every morning at 6 o'clock. If I'm acting in Durban, I'm in chambers in Durban at 6 o'clock. And if I'm in Pietermaritzburg, I make sure that my goal is to be there by 6:30, but the realistic goal is 6:45 because the traffic can be variable. I stay at work until I've done all the jobs that I've set myself to do. In the time that I've been acting, I've delivered 80 judgments, 40 extempore judgments, and 40 written judgments. And I can tell you that I have calculated, I wanted to be able to tell you scientifically how long it took me to deliver those.
I don't think it's necessary, Mr.
Thank you.
Yeah. AJP, I move on to the MEC. MEC?
Thanks, Chair. Just one question. Advocate, KZN has many areas that are under tribal authorities.
Yes,
And those are areas that are populated by people who are really struggling to access justice through courts
yes,
because of socio-economic conditions that impact on them.
yeah.
Now, what would you say should be the role of tribal courts to
Well,
extend access to justice to such people?
I think that's very feasible. The Constitution empowers tribal and customary courts to practice and to do their business, as long as it doesn't conflict with the tenets of the Constitution. You will have seen from my record that I have quite a long association with the Small Claims Court, and I'm wondering if perhaps there isn't a way of introducing both concepts in these rural areas where people can get quality access to justice at no cost. So I think that those courts serve a very good purpose. They are primarily suited for rural areas and for people who are not very sophisticated. And I think they serve a very good purpose. So I'm very much in favor of that happening. And if that could perhaps be introduced together with small claims courts, which I'm quite happy to go and investigate, hopefully that could achieve a very good result for everyone.
Thanks, CJ.
Thank you. I'm going to ask Mr. Mossop to ask you to try and make your answers clear.
Yes, sir. I do apologize.
Commissioner Nyambi, then it will be Commissioner Nochesi. I don't propose to allow too many questions in view of time. Commissioner Nyambi.
Thank you, CJ. Evening, Advocate Mossop.
Good evening.
I'll be failing if I don't appreciate what I'm seeing. The last time you were here in April,
Yes,
you were 5 and it was 1 vacancy.
that is correct.
Now you are 7 and we've got 3 vacancies.
Yes.
The secret behind the different person that is appearing to us today, because I've seen a lot of people, once they come for the second time, they even lose confidence. But I see we are on another level today, so that other candidates that will come here and not get a recommendation, they can learn a thing or two from what I'm seeing.
Thank you very much, Commissioner. It's very kind of you to say so. I think that on the last occasion, it went by too quickly. I was only in for 18 minutes, and I really thought I was winning the game. But I didn't realize I was still in the change room. I am now as I was then, but no one asked me, what is your philosophy about the new South Africa? Have you embraced it? No one asked me those questions. Mr. Ndlovu asked me about his church problems and whether he could rely on the presumption of innocence. And those are all, I was asked abstract questions, but not anything about me. You're seeing me now as I am, and as I have been for the last 26 years in practice.
Oh, let me wish you all the best. Thank you
very much, sir.
Thank you,
It's very
CJ.
Thank you, Commissioner Nochesi.
CJ, I could have asked you to ask this question. KK, do something that is historic in your life, which changed perception.
Yes.
I'm asking, it's one question, but it's blended into
Sure.
one. Can you speak the Zulu language? Here is a Zulu man. He reaches out to you.
Yes.
He gives, can you speak Zulu to show that we appreciate his culture. 2, you mentioned about people that have mentored, and some you give a question.
One question,
Yeah,
Commissioner.
it's just one. It's based on this. It's based on this. It's based on this. The point, what I'm asking is, out of these persons that you have mentored,
Yes.
how many black women that are in that group? Because everybody is to say,
Okay.
I have these people, I've done this. How many black women
Yes.
and African
Yes.
peoples that are involved?
Okay. So to answer the first part of your one question, I cannot speak Zulu. I know words of Zulu, but you may be surprised to learn that I'm enrolled with Professor Nolene Turner, a teacher of Zulu in KwaZulu in Durban, for lessons. I actually commenced lessons in Zulu when I was acting in Pietermaritzburg, and unfortunately the time that the lessons were conducted was at 5 o'clock. I was happy to stay at the Pietermaritzburg High Court and log in with Zoom, but you may have heard earlier in the day that the Wi-Fi doesn't work well in in Pietermaritzburg. So I've had to withdraw from that course, but my money is still with her, and I now need to find a time where I can go to improve my Zulu. As the second part of your only question, I've had 7 pupils with 4 black pupils. 2 were black women. 1 failed. It was the very first pupil that I ever had. I had only been at the bar 2 years when I was given a pupil. The lady she came from a company background. She had no prior legal experience, and she didn't pass. But the very last pupil that I have had was a black woman who is now in my group. I ensured that she joined my group. And I have I make no secret of it, and I don't intend to offend my other pupils, but she was the best pupil I ever had. And I expect that in a few years' time, she'll be sitting where I am now. So that's the answer to your question.
Thank you, Commissioner Klaba, and then I don't think there are other hands.
Good afternoon, Advocate.
Good afternoon.
I share the views of Honorable my colleague Nyambi. But what struck me is that you drink neither coffee nor tea. What will you offer me if I visit you in your office?
Coffee or tea or anything else or water, but I don't drink it.
Thank you.
Now I'll go to the commissioners on attending virtually. Is there any commissioner who has a question that they think is very important?
No questions. Thank you, Chief Justice.
Thank you. Commissioner Breitenbach.
No question, Chief Justice.
Thank you, Commissioner Shabangu Mdawe. And no question from Commissioner Barnett. Okay, all right. Thank you.
Chief Justice,
Yeah?
Justice, sorry. Short question, sorry.
Okay, one short question.
Thank you. Advocate, if you look at the judgment, the very first judgment in your bundle, so it's on page 107, stop of 108. It's an application, but the question is just this: what type of application is that, and where in the judgment can one read that it is that type of application? Now, just the nature of the application.
Sorry, the bundle that I've been given. Oh, sorry, 107. Did you say, sir?
Yes. On the type numbers, it's page 114. It starts the actual paragraph.
Yes, I see that. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Well, the notice of motion should have made reference to the fact that what they were asking for was a declaration that the time bar clause was contra bonus mores. It's not actually in the notice of motion, but the body of the application dealt with that evidence, and that's what I was called upon to determine.
Yeah, it's just that I put it just that the reader obviously should be able to understand what this is about, and one reads through this whole application and you just realize it gets dismissed. You're not sure what's being dismissed.
Well, under paragraph 15, it deals with the question of contra bonus mores, and that's what the thrust of the application is about.
Thank you, Chief Justice.
Thank you, Commissioner Barnett. We have come to the end of this interview. I take this opportunity to thank you for availing yourself, and we'll give you 3 minutes if you have 2 or 3 points that you want to emphasize to the commissioners that they should bear in mind as they consider your candidature. But if you are happy that all issues have been adequately addressed, that will be fine as well.
Chief Justice, I've been given a very fair and pleasant hearing. I'm covered,
Yes.
to use a phrase that you chaps use.
Yes.
Thank you very much, everyone.
No, thank you very much, and you are now excused.
Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you.